Quint, good to see you. Thanks for taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat. Always appreciate that because I know you're busy. I wanted to kick off the interview by reflecting back to you something that you said to me the other day. You said AI is going to bring back the dead. Now, that stuck in my mind. That stuck in my mind, I can tell you. Oh, and what did you mean by that and why does it matter?
So we are, as a production company, good morning, Paul. As a production company specializing in AI, we're increasingly getting asked by companies who have got some sort of heritage to reanimate the founders of the company in order to, um, ironically, bring life to, for example, an AGM. So say, for example, you have a company that has got a 200-year-old heritage. So the founder of the company may basically be an oil painting on the wall of the building in the boardroom. We can take that oil painting and make that oil painting come to life. If you give us some still images of the CEO as we can make that come to life. If you give us and moving on from there, if you give us some biographical details, we can make that person come to life. More recently, this has been done. I mean, names that spring to mind were brands giving their face to an image. So Bob Monkhouse gave his image to prostate cancer, if memory serves.
Saw that.
Michael Parkinson's voice was recorded um, once he passed away. And most recently, we are, and I better not name names, but there are companies who are reanimating their CEOs for AGMs. Now, if they passed away recently, it means that they've probably had a profile on the internet,
Yeah.
which means that we can take that imagery and make really, really good photorealistic and honestly lifelike uh, avatars of them. Obviously, we need the consent of the estate, but it really, Paul, it's really an interesting thing because in the motion picture industry, Val Kilmer's being reanimated
Yeah.
for a part in a film. I think everybody's seen online. In fact, just yesterday, as recording on the 16th, just last night with the Oscars, and there were some trails of videos with deceased stars sitting in the audience of the Oscars and reacting to the proceedings. So this is quite spooky because it means that, well, let's be honest, we can take someone's spouse and we could reanimate them. We have enough biographical detail if the partner, the widower or the widow gave us the information to make that person come back to life.
Yeah. And tell me, why are companies doing this? I mean, why do they, if you're a company and I mean, why would you want to reanimate your founder that has perhaps passed away? Well, and why would you want to do that? I mean, just talk us through the value of that to those companies.
Well, I think a lot of companies trade on their heritage, and if they bring the founder of the company back to life, it it's an in, puts an interesting twist. It reinforces, I suppose, in terms of brand equity. It reinforces the founder um, being there talking about the organization. It's, I mean, at the moment, it's a novel idea.
Mm.
It's got to be handled sensitively, obviously. Um, I think that those are the reasons why we're asked to do it, why companies approach us to do it. I mean, obviously, it's very niche, and it's only been happening in the last sort of 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've been able to duplicate people's faces in terms of deepfake for probably over 18 months now. But this kind of application is very new.
It's quite
Um,
interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting sort of take on things. And how did you get into this? I mean, I mean, what set you on the? I mean, I can see why your business would want to do this. I mean, I get that. I mean, I can see it being quite lucrative and quite interesting and all the other things. How did you kind of get into this?
into AI, Paul, or into
Into
that.
that area, AI generally, and that specifically.
Oh, well, AI in general started along with everybody else in 2022, late 2022, with ChatGPT and the LLMs coming along. I mean, just some background. I never thought that AI was ever going to affect our industry. I always thought it was going to come for the accountants and for the people
Yeah.
with Excel sheets, not for the creative industry. And all that changed with Sora when they released their video. And suddenly the writing was on the wall for us. And it's proven to be the case that now video can be produced using AI. So we had an option. The battle is how creatively good it is.
Mhm.
So um, how how you can have character consistency, but gradually, bit by bit, all of these hurdles are starting to become possible, are being overcome. Then there was also the challenges around intellectual property and around copyright, and that's still a battle that's being fought in the courts and online, and then ethically and morally, and then those have got the considerations as well. And we're navigating all of that stuff as a production company. But just recently, in the last 3 or 4 months, companies have started to approach us. Can you make our CEO come to life? Can you bring our if the company's got a heritage 200 years old, we can make the owner and the founder come to life. And if, as I said earlier, and if the person has passed away in the last sort of 5 or 10 years, obviously there's a very high chance there's a digital footprint, which means that we can scrape that information and make a really good job of it. I mean, another application for AI avatars like that is history, of course. So we can make President Lincoln come to life, or Winston Churchill come to life, or anybody historically come to life, and present from a first person, for example, why they took the decisions that they did. Um, and I mean, that's got interesting implications for any kind of education.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what was going through my mind. Is it schools and colleges and universities that are interested in that?
Hasn't been at the moment.
Yeah.
We did get involved in one project for the American Revolution for National Geographic, and that's still ongoing. They're taking their time about producing it. But I have seen a couple of instances on Instagram where there is a company, I think Tiny Histories, they're doing it. So
Uh,
they're using figurines rather than actual real people, but it's the same principle. It'll be very possible very shortly, I'd say, but certainly before the end of this year, to produce videos using historic figures and bringing them to life.
yeah, I mean it's good. Whichever way it shakes down, it's going to be an interesting few years. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that, is there? One of the things that I hear from CEOs that, particularly at the moment when there is so much uncertainty around the way AI is going to reshape things,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens. I mean, building a business is like riding a roller coaster. I mean, there are good days, there are bad days. I mean, it's a tough gig. What is it about this kind of area that you're involved in that kind of motivates you to kind of bounce out of bed in the morning and kind of ride that roller coaster? I mean, what is it about this that excites you?
Oh, it's easy for me. It's storytelling. My background has always been in film and television. I had a psychological background as well, with my aunt and uncle and my mother, who were psychotherapists and psychoanalysts. And for me, as people, we always tell ourselves stories about ourselves, and we tell ourselves stories about our lives in the cultural context, and it's those stories that really interest me. And Walt Disney did it the best with animation, where he told some fantastic stories. Now, stories in particular with animation can be metaphors or allegories of situations, and they communicate in ways which really have an impact. And so, within the entertainment world, obviously you're creating stories, but brands, B2B and B2C, create stories about themselves and about their products, which resonate with the audience. I mean, what a cynical approach to that is the old classic line, advertising takes away your soul and sells it back to you for the price of the product.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what video does. It communicates very, very successfully. And now, we started really from in the year 2000 up to the year 2013 when it became possible to animate. And then in 2022, AI came in, and now uh, we have the potential to say and do anything with video and create some really amazing stories.
Yeah. And
But
tell me,
storytelling,
let me ask you about building your business. I mean, in what way? Because I mean, it's a very interesting area that technology is revolutionizing what's happening in your sector,
yeah,
particularly lots of other sectors as well, but particularly in your world.
yeah,
So one of the questions is always, well, what do you do with it, or what don't you do with it? I mean, how have your values
yeah.
as the CEO, how have they shaped the way you built the company?
Uh, okay, well, I have sort of personal ethical guidelines that I don't want to cross. Um, and those I try to make my company steer through those, steer along with those ethical guidelines. Um, we I mean that's been true from day one, really. I lean into the financial sector, the tech sector, and healthcare. I particularly like healthcare, but obviously there are, should we call them, roguish elements within finance, tech, and healthcare, and we have to be aware uh, of what they're trying to say. And it's quite clear to me if somebody is being disingenuous, or if the values of what is being said don't really match up with my own. And then that's a judgment call on its own basis. I mean, I try not to do any harm. Um, that's a key for me. I do want to have, I've got kids, and I've got sort of principles which I want to live by. But you're right, it does, excuse me, it does it does conflict sometimes. Yeah.
And what is it you particularly like about healthcare? And why is it? What's
Well,
the interest
well,
there?
I think for me personally, your health is your wealth, and we're living in a time of unprecedented healthcare change, where health has gone from um, something that has been the responsibility of the state, for example, or of our culture, to something that's personally responsible to ourselves. I mean, a number of factors which are influencing that. I mean, we're living far longer
Yeah.
than we ever have done. I mean, both of us 100 years ago probably would be pushing up daisies by now.
Mm.
I think the life is now not dictated by your lifespan, but by your health span.
Yeah.
I don't want to, I would like to be like my mother, who recently passed away at the age of 93 and was still running around on the Northern Line
Yeah.
and
And what
you
is
know
it about doing business in that area? I mean, I get your point about how our generation is really benefiting from what's happened,
mm,
'cause we have a longer health span. Um,
mm.
what is it about doing business in that area that appeals to you? Is it the stories that are involved? I mean, what is it
Yeah.
about that?
Well, for example, with the AI revolution, there's some real good news stories. I mean, the AlphaFold protein uh, project that recently enabled all sorts of new drugs and to be developed. We're working at the moment with in a lot in radiology, where AI is making a massive difference to being able to, for example, scan 1,000 mammograms a minute, rather than have oncologists looking at, or radiologists taking far longer. Certainly in the area of mental health, we're in the middle of a mental health crisis, and I think that in terms of helping mostly children and young adults um, around subjects like anger or addiction or trauma. There's fantastic opportunities for psychoeducation to come along using video in order to reach out and support those people. There's all sorts of ways in which healthcare really lights me up as a market sector to be involved in.
Yeah, yeah. And what is it about your company that you're most proud of? I mean, I know you've done quite a lot of interesting projects. What would you say is the one that really kind of, you think, yeah, that's the thing I'm most proud of? Anything in particular?
Too many to mention, really, Paul. I really like I really like the work. I mean, these aren't the biggest payers, but I really like working with charities. So I mean, we work obviously we work regularly with, I think, 12 Fortune 500 companies. So we work with JP Morgan, HP, Siemens, Pfizer, Novartis,
Yeah.
Bank of America and so forth. These, monster, behemoths, multinational companies. But it's the small companies, like, for example, the National Association of Children of Alcoholics, a small charity which has had its funding taken away by successive governments. And all they do is deal with children caught in the crossfire of the drinks companies and their parents. Their parents are addicted. They're not getting parented properly. NACOA have a helpline which is accessed by 25,000 children a year, and we produce the content to advertise that helpline to those children, which is absolutely not a payer, but it's something I'm
Yeah.
really proud that we're involved in.
Yeah. And must really help people as well, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah, yes, absolutely it does. Yeah. But I don't think one of the things going back to the AI question is I don't think charities and NGOs are aware of just how they can now afford to make really sophisticated video content for, and it falls within their budget, being pennies, not pounds.
Yeah.
And that's something I I just hope that the penny drops, pun intended, and that they start approaching us with to do these videos because they can do it now.
Yeah, yeah, and it's extraordinary how I mean, because the costs are falling, aren't they? More people can access that. Let me
Yeah.
ask you about building the business. I mean, when you um, set out, I mean, you presumably had a view about what you could do and what sort of challenges you would face. Have you had any big surprises along the way?
Oh God, there are too many to mention. I mean, when we started out, when we started out, it was only just possible to start out. So it was year 2000. Computers could only just ingest video. We went out and shot on mini DV cameras and
Yeah.
then ingested it onto computers. We were editing on Premiere, I don't know, 0.1. There was no internet effectively. And we were the format was VHS, which you're too young to remember, bless you. But it was a kind of tape, Paul, if I can make it like this. It's like a cassette. It went into a anyway. So 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 then it went on to CD-ROM, then it went on to DVD. Um, and then by about 2006, 2007, the internet was around and we could start producing content for online. And then the crisis happened in the financial crisis in 2008. We got into JP Morgan, and that's when things started to really move for us, both in the finance sector and in tech. 2013, suddenly it became possible with the advent of Adobe to do animation, which was fantastic because it really enabled us to use animation in order to explain business ideas. Essentially, if something's too big, like two planets colliding into one another, too small, like a virus, or too complex, like I don't know, planes taking off Heathrow Airport, to show how that all happened, you have to go to animation. And that was always a challenge for us because a lot of companies had products and services that were difficult to explain using video because video is too literal a format. Once animation came along, we could really get in there. And I'm sure we're going to come on to this, but as time went by, the falling costs of production and the falling costs of, in particular, of animation production, and latterly, most recently with AI, that meant that we could compete with the big boys. So we could really sit at the top table with the big advertising agency like Saatchi and Saatchi, J. Walter Thompson, and most recently Omnicom and Publicis, alongside much more established production companies. And we could play with toys that would play with software that was matching what bits of software that cost 10 times as much money and occupied spaces that, I mean, like, just take voiceovers, for example. I used to do voiceovers commercially. I used to go to the bridge in Waldorf Street and there'd be a voiceover desk the size of this room that I'm sitting in now, and a sound engineer and plush edit suites. And I can see the smile on your face. You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
this technology we're using now is replicating what those suites used to do. And we're just talking about 15 years ago, and that's now possible. So everything's become much more compressed. A laptop is all you need nowadays. I mean,
Yeah.
look at news crews. News crews used to go out with satellite trucks and half a dozen people, more probably, and a satellite on the top of it, satellite transmitter. Now they go out with a producer who's also a cameraman, who's also a sound man, and they produce it on the fly.
Yeah, yeah, it's extraordinary the way technology is changing things. And you mentioned the impact that JP Morgan had on your business. I mean, have there been other kind of critical moments that have shaped the way the business has developed?
Yes, well, HPE is a major client of ours, and they some companies were slow to adopt video, strangely. Others not so slow. HP was one of the ones that were early pioneers, and and then the way that they adopted it was also interesting, and we fell into lockstep with them. Uh, so um, and the way that they produce it. So originally, corporations would only use video to do talking heads, for example,
Yeah,
and then we do those. Then they would go into narrated brand videos, um, and then those brand videos became more and more sophisticated. So the original, brand videos were maybe £200,000, but they fell and fell and fell. So a decent brand video still cost you probably 50 to 60K. But that's and our companies were. So I'm trying to think of waypoints for you. I mean, one of the big waypoints for us was working with the European Commission,
right.
because they had their purview was to create content for all of the members of the European Union, and that fell to us. We were key supplier. We are still key supplier to the European Union until 2016 when Brexit happened, in which case then they turned around, they went, no, you cannot produce videos, excuse an accent, you cannot produce videos saying how great it is to be in the EU because you are not in the
Yeah.
EU anymore.
Well, fair comment, really.
Fair comment. So we very quickly had to set up an office and a new business in Amsterdam, which is where we're
Yeah,
working for the EU at the moment. But then that only became, I mean, look at technology there. So we were doing 27 different translations.
yeah,
I thought maybe slightly less, maybe 24, 25 different translations for all of the videos. So it became this massive logistical um, enterprise, which only became possible using tech, to do the translations and to do the to put those translations into multiple projects. And that stood us in good stead because the thing that happened after that was the games industry suddenly exploded, and we were producing videos for Candy Crush and for King and for and eventually for ByteDance. And so all of those skills that we learned and were honed working with the European Commission, we could then apply to working within the game sector.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting the way things unfold, isn't it? Let me ask you about, I mean, how do you, as the CEO, I mean, given that amount of change that's happening, I mean, I don't think
Yeah,
there's ever been as much change around as there is now. I mean,
quite right.
everywhere you look, things are changing, and a lot of it's driven by tech. But so the challenge for the CEO, I think, is how do you keep the business, if you like, on the front foot,
Yes.
moving forward, adapting to the stuff that's coming down the pipe? I mean, how do you, as the CEO, keep people focused on what's next?
Well, I think that one of the things is that every day is day one. I mean, it's point. I can't sit back and rest on my laurels. I can't because it changes. I'm honestly, Paul, it changes every month. There's something. In fact, case in point, last week, we had a massive client, and because of changes in software, they completely altered the workflow, and we had to adapt to that immediately and collaborate in supporting them with how it changed. So there is no uh, resting. There's no, I mean, I've been running it for 25 years and every day is day one. That's the first thing. Other changes like COVID and working from home.
Yeah,
Suddenly I've gone from having a boiler house operation in London where everyone's, I've got 25 men and women all collaborating on projects, all looking over each other's shoulders, apprentices and trainees coming up through the ranks, all getting the pearls of wisdom from people who are older. And that was shot to hell after working from home came in.
yeah,
And now I've got disparate groups. We're all on teams and working that way. Obviously, new technology comes in, and we've got to stay on top of all of that. So I really have to stay on my mettle and learn as fast as I can what new um, workflows and what new software and not what new paradigms are happening, so that I can be across it, so that if, because I'm often the front man with this,
Yeah.
I I can deal. I mean, I love dealing with people our age, because we have a rapport. We can talk about, I don't know, Thatcher or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, or but the majority, the age of the people who most commission work at the moment are in their early 30s, late 20s,
Yeah.
and they're the ones with the six-figure budgets. So I better be able to talk about Instagram and TikTok
Yeah.
as in the next breath, as well as about. So I
I
have
mean,
to
it's
stay.
interesting what you're saying, because what you're saying is that the ability of the business to keep learning is a critical factor. Whether
Absolutely.
it's you or your staff, I mean, that learning process, however many people it involves, is an absolutely critical factor in staying ahead, in staying in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely. I can't emphasize it enough. You absolutely have to be across everything, and you have to always be open to learning. Every day there is something new to learn, and there is a fire hose of information coming towards us, and we have to. I personally have to sift through it and work it out as quickly as I can, so that we have a narrative within the organization that we're all working from. And there's no point if there are bits and bobs of information in different spots, we hit we're likely to hit some sort of a problem, or we have to all understand what's going, which means that I constantly talk to our head of production in America and in Europe. I constantly talk to our head of AI and to our head of video, and I ensure that those people all are talking to one another as well.
And when you say there's a narrative, I mean,
Yeah.
'cause that's an interesting term.
Mhm.
When you say there's a narrative within the company about that, I mean, just explain what you mean. What does that mean to people in practical terms?
Well, we're all what I try to foster within the company, and it was a lot easier before working from home, is this esprit de corps where everybody has got everybody's back covered, and we're all trying to get the job done, get the job across the line, delight the clients, go above and beyond for them, but have fun in the process. I
Mm.
mean, let's have fun doing this. What we're doing is making stories. We're making things come to life. We are invested in the magic of producing stories which hopefully enrich and innovate the audience's experience of their lives. So let's keep that flame going in each of us, and so that we take it forward.
Yeah.
And and the challenge is to, but it's really hard to do that if someone has worked till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then they're up and working at 8 o'clock on the same project. It's really hard to do that if our clients are stroppy. Let's put it like that way. It's really
And,
those are the.
and let me ask you about that specific thing. I mean, we talked earlier on about how it's tough on the CEOs, kind of riding the roller coaster. I mean,
Yeah,
it's also tough on staff, isn't it? For
yeah,
the reasons you've just outlined. I mean,
yeah.
how do you build resilience into the business so that people are able to, deal with problems when they come their way, not get knocked over by things?
Mm.
I mean, how do you build that resilience, that kind of resilience muscle, if you like, into the business?
A lot of it, like technically, my purview is to ensure that technically everything is tickety boo, so that even just you know so that the computers are running, so that the software we've got are running, that the security measures are in place, and that is just continual review. And then we have to have headroom. That's really important, and I really important for me. It is a point of pride to me that my staff do not work past 6 o'clock at night, and if they do, then there's got to be a good reason for it. And if they're working past 10 o'clock at night, then I have a firm word with the producer, because they shouldn't be doing that. We're not in that game anymore. That the joy of working in the film industry, and producers saying, well, you're working in the film game, it's not a vacation, it's a job. Sorry, I just went on a little soapbox there. You can
No,
hear how
it's
passionate
all
I am
about
about that.
resilience, isn't it? I mean, because those are the challenges that you're facing in the market.
Yeah. And clients do move the goalposts. We just had a job at the weekend where there was an after dinner gala. The video edit went from, oh, can we have 30 seconds to can we have 2 minutes? Well, yes, you can, but there has to be, contingency fees attached to that. And rather than get that one editor to work on it till the wee hours, bring in another editor to work alongside them, and 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 try to ensure that everybody stays sane while they're working. And most of all, they enjoy the job they do.
Yeah.
Um, because for the reasons that
If they're
just
enjoying it, they're going to do a good job, aren't they? I mean, that's the
exactly.
important point about that. And let me ask you about, I mean, you work with clients all over the place.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the interesting things I think about business in that kind of global setting is that, doing business in LA, it's very
yeah,
different from doing business in London or doing
yeah,
business in Singapore.
yeah.
How do you, I mean, sort of, first of all, localize? How do you take account of different cultures? I mean, there's one other thing I want to come back to. That we'll talk about
Yeah.
just how do you take into account the different expectations that people have in different parts of the world?
Well, that's a very good question, and we and there's two parts to that. One is how we deal with the clients, which is very much you have to be culturally aware. If you're dealing with somebody in Los Angeles on one call, and you're dealing somebody from Riyadh on the next call, or dealing with somebody in Mumbai on the next call, you have to be culturally aware. There are differences, and I have um, through commercial experience learnt how to deal with that. At the end of the day, we're all people. I think that's really important to hold on to in terms of we've all got challenges, we've all got existential um, uh, factors going on in our lives, and so at core we've got a lot of shared values. Culturally, they may come through in different ways. Um, then the other part of it is when we're producing it, we really have to be aware of those values. So, for example, a thobe is very different in Abu Dhabi than it is in Dubai, or it is in Saudi Arabia. This expression here, that caught me out once, means something very different in Italian than it does anywhere else in the world. Sorry, there's something
Right,
zooming in there. Um, so I was Paul, quick story. So we were filming that sign, and through that was the Taj Mahal, was the Eiffel Tower, um, and my job was to film the Needles Lighthouse off the coast of the Isle of Wight. And we
right,
were in a storm. We were on this boat going up and down, up and down, up and down. And I had a hand model kneeling down on the stern of the boat with his hands up, and the
right,
cameraman was filming through his hands. And we got the and we got the shot. And as we were coming back, the pharma company in LA said, "Hold it, there's a whole different effing idea, because that means something in Italian, basic panani in Italian." That and the whole ad campaign was scrapped. So there's an example of how
yeah,
the
yeah.
uh, the
It's so
culture.
easy to get those things wrong, isn't it, if you're not careful?
Yeah, that wasn't our fault. That was our client's fault. But yeah,
Yeah.
we
And let me ask you something else about the globalization. I mean, globalization,
yeah,
because of digital technology, opens up huge opportunities. I mean, you can work anywhere on the planet, really, can't you?
yeah, yeah,
The other side to that is that you're then competing with
yes,
businesses like yours. You could be competing with businesses from anywhere.
yes,
I mean, perhaps it's. I mean, it probably isn't even just the English language speaking world that you're competing with. You're competing globally. I mean, how do you balance exploiting the opportunities that creates with defending your kind of competitive positioning from other people? I mean, because it's such an interesting challenge there. Global opportunities, but global competition.
yeah. And very astute, Paul. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we I mean the key thing you touched on initially is we speak English, and most people do. I mean, the business of the language of the business world is English wherever you're from, and that's really fantastic. The other thing is we're in London, which means we're equidistant from the United States and from Southeast Asia. We can work,
Yeah,
first thing in the morning. We have this what's the expression they use in banking? Follow the sun model. So
yeah,
we can take an edit and we can produce it when they get up in the model. When they get up in the morning, they can see the final edit. That plays to our advantage. We do recruit globally, and obviously labor costs are lower in some places than they are in others. So freelancers in obviously in South Africa and Latin America are cheaper than freelancers in North America and Australia. Um, and but you're and and so yes, you're absolutely right. We do compete with companies globally, but fortunately, I think the other thing is that the UK, in particular London, has got this fantastic reputation for producing high quality work,
Yeah.
and it's got a really good creative history, and you've only got to go and switch on a TV in America and look at the adverts that they've got there, and you just think, oh my God, uh, that's ridiculous. Um, you the quality of the work that is produced elsewhere is, I mean, I used the word narrative earlier on. I would say that maybe creative literacy. Can we use that? Is that a bit too highfalutin? I don't know.
No,
But
I mean,
there's,
I think it's great that the UK has developed some strengths around that kind of creative industries. I mean, I think we do pretty well.
yeah,
Much above our weight, I would say.
yeah, I think so. I think and there are nuances like irony, for example, and and sort of create cultural subtleties and nuances that we have that do translate into the work that we produce, um, that provide creative stories, like juxtaposing two different creative ideas in order to make a creative, so that a creative point lands, or to go into metaphor, into allegories, in order to, which we can more easily do using AI and animation, in order to illustrate a point that you'd otherwise struggle to make. And to make something creative and relatable is still an art, whether you're using a software program or whether you're using a video.
I
Um,
think one of the other things that I like about is that the Brits have got a great sense of humour.
yeah,
And
yes,
what that is an illustration of people's creative thinking, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
humour is about thinking creatively about
yeah,
things, about
yes. Well,
uh,
yeah,
and that I think the fact that Brits have got a sense of humour. I mean, not all countries kind of get our humour, but it obviously
yeah,
plays out in terms of informing how we do our creative stuff. I think because
yeah,
people think very, they're very smart, and I
yes.
think some of that comes from that kind of creative thinking. I think.
Yes, yeah. Well, Freud said it. I think Freud said that a joke is a juxtaposition of two disparate
Yeah.
ideas, and that's something that we're as a culture we're very good at.
Yeah.
Um, and you have to be careful with sort of cultural sensitivities, of course, and you can't lay it on too thick, or you're going to start offending people. I mean, and then you got other humor like gallows humor, and
Yeah.
uh, but yes, if humor is important, and it's important that you use humor in some context so that the audience can get the joke. They're in on something
Yeah.
that you've thrown the ball,
Absolutely.
they're catching it.
Yeah. And let me ask you about what you've learned from the experience. I know you've been building your business for quite a while now. I mean,
Mm.
what would you say? I've got a couple of questions on this front. What would you say is the most difficult decision you've had to make? And what did you learn from that process?
I hate making people redundant. I just hate it. And uh, we're going. There's been a couple of times, I mean, COVID being one of them, where we were just scraping along the bottom, and every company has that, where you have cash flow issues. They weren't of our own making, and we had to.
And but what did you learn from that? I mean, I'm conscious that you had to make a difficult decision, and I totally get it. I mean, when you spent a lot of time recruiting good people, the last thing you want to do is get rid of them.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that, though?
What I learned from that was, and sorry to sound a bit soppy on here, is that even though I'm supposed to be some capitalist, red of tooth and claw businessman, I'm actually a bit of a softie. And
Right.
I don't look at my staff as chess pieces on a board. They really are men and women who I care about, and whose lives I am integral to. Um, and uh, and it really is painful doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry to be a bit soppy,
No,
Paul.
no. I mean, I think a lot of people don't understand how much that those sorts of issues ride on the shoulder of the CEO.
Yes.
No, I mean it all comes down to the CEO ultimately, doesn't it? I mean, you
Yeah.
might you get views from other people, but ultimately it's the decision. Those are the sort of difficult decisions that land on your desk, and they're never easy.
No.
Let me ask you another one. I mean, what would you say is the biggest mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from that?
Um, I think the the biggest mistakes, the biggest mistake. I think the biggest mistake, I think the biggest mistake we made is not being more fleet of foot. I think on occasion we've been flat-footed when we should have been more on it. And I think that when the situation changes, we could pivot faster than we have done. So when animation became possible in 2013, we were a little off the pace. We could have been at the party sooner. And it was a turf war in 2013. We could have grabbed more clients and made more of that. I think in 2016 we could have reacted fast to Brexit. And the implications of that hit
And
us
what have
hard.
what have you learned from that? I mean, in terms of how you would deal with things in the future. I mean, has it affected? I mean, first of all, did those poor decisions, if you like, have an
Yeah.
impact on the business? And what would you do differently going forward?
I think they okay. I constantly tussle with our CFO, of course, and the CFO has got all the money, and they understand the job book, and they understand the ebbs and flows of the company. And I am constantly at odds with the CFO. I mean, he accuses me of being sort of whimsical and flighty and Walter Mitty. I
Yeah,
accuse him of being a bit too bah humbug and Scrooge. I mean, that seems to be the relationship between CFOs and
yeah,
CEOs everywhere I
yeah,
look.
yeah.
Um, and I I I should have maybe been harder with the CFO in order to release a bit of funds in order to do, for example, moonshots. Let's just try this. Let's suck it and see. Let's run it up the flagpole and see what happens. And if we fail, well, at least we tried it. Maybe there's some takeaways that we can apply to something else. What's the point? I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here, but what's the point of being a small company which is agile and is trying to outmaneuver the big players if we can't be faster and fleeter of foot than those big players, right? And I think on occasion, especially around AI, we could have been a little bit quicker and seen opportunities. We saw the opportunities. We could have been quicker to realize them
But
and to
it's
take
it's
them.
really interesting you describe that because one of the main things that gives small companies or creates opportunities for small companies is because they can move faster and be more flexible. There's
Exactly.
no point being, it's the big companies that do things in slow and long-winded ways, isn't it? I mean, you want to do. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting that happened. Let me ask you about the flip side. What would you say are the factors that have made your business successful?
Um, as a counterpoint to what I've just said, I think the early adoption of animation, I think that was a masterstroke, really. When Adobe After Effects became mainstream, we did adopt it and we offered it to clients, and our clients, especially the Americans, were absolutely blown away by the fact that we could do that.
Mm.
And that meant that a whole world opened up to us, not just creating talking heads, which were more interesting. Um, for example, by putting animated metrics up in the what we call the look space next to the talking heads, but in doing graphs and making programs, basically become making programs for a start and giving them a magazine style format that they didn't otherwise have. Suddenly corporate videos lost that fussiness and that tiredness of what the word corporate sort of means. It's quite a, uh, a disparaging sort of expression. Um, and suddenly corporate became, well, hang on, actually corporate videos are probably the most creative and interesting videos you can produce, because so long as you've got a bit of imagination on behalf of the marketing team and the sales team, you can give them whatever you want. And you can sit down at a table and say, well, actually, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And not just in terms of the creative, but in terms of, I can take the video and I can give you uh, 50 stills from that video, which you can use for print and PR around that. I can, if you give me your CAD drawings, I can make those CAD drawings come to life, and you've just saved yourself £5 grand. And we can really give you more bang for your buck if you let us, if you invite us to the strategy upstream. Don't tell us what to do. Invite us on as being a strategic partner. We can really give you that. And the projects we've been involved in that have been the most successful being projects where we've been invited to sit at the top table right from the get-go. And I think AI is really going to make that important because the workflow has completely changed.
Yeah. And let me ask you, in terms of your experience of building the company, I mean, what have you enjoyed most about the journey that you've been on?
I've enjoyed meeting the brightest people I could ever meet. If I'm talking to a CEO, if I'm interviewing a CEO, like your good self, I'm talking to somebody who's obviously very, very bright, very imaginative, a well-rounded person who's lived a life. A person who's said, yes, I can. Person who's stood up and they've gone, I'm going to give this a shot, especially self-made people. I love being around self-made people who have run with it, and they've seen a shot and they're going to give it, especially people, well, anybody who's self-made. I love that. I love being around creative people. I love traveling with work and being in a work environment where I'm seeing, somebody's vision come to life and describing that vision using video and animation, and also working with locals and getting under the skin of wherever in the local environment. Was that Kuala Lumpur or Georgia? We're working in an environment. I'm not just a tourist. I'm there for the week or so.
It's certainly an exciting world to be in. I mean, I can definitely see that. And,
I mean,
if you were starting from scratch, is
mm.
there anything you'd do differently this time around, knowing what you know now?
Everything we've learned has been by accretion and by hard-won experience. I could, theoretically, I could take all of the processes that we've got and operating procedures that we've got and superimpose them on us when it was just me and Matt, my colleague, back in year 2000, but half of them would be totally irrelevant. I mean, it's an interesting conversation to be had about how a small business operates so differently from a large business. And now we're 50 people with 4 offices globally, and we're dealing with AI, and we're dealing with animation, and we're dealing with Fortune 500 companies. A lot of the working principles that stand us in such good stead now would be totally inapplicable to us when we were based in London as a team of a half a dozen in a cowshed in Addleston.
Yeah. And let me one last question before we wind up. If you were to give some advice to a rookie CEO starting out, I mean, what would your one piece of advice be?
Follow your dream.
Follow your dream. Good advice.
You either curl up in a fetal ball and say, I can't do this, and live with the regret, or you give it a punt and see what happens.
Yeah. And that's what life's about, isn't it? Giving it a punt and seeing what happens, because we can't, I mean, despite what some people think, you can't actually predict what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, nobody's ever been able to do that. So you just have to give it a punt, really. I mean, a great piece of advice. Quint, thanks for taking the opportunity to share your story. Really good, really good. Thank you. I mean, we appreciate that, and good luck going forward.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
See you soon, Quint. Cheers. Bye-bye.